that Inquilinx is working on really hard right now, and then we'll do some conference wrap-up after that. All right, without further ado, our first panelist, Ibrahim Mubarak from Right to Survive RAP in Portland, Oregon.
I don't know how you all feeling, but I had an exciting night last night. And you know when you mature, when you need another minute of sleep, right? So I'm going to wake us up. I'm going to say up with the people, you say yeah, yeah. I'm going to say down with capitalism, you say boom, boom. You ready? Yeah. And then it said Muslims can't say boom, boom, but I'm going to say it anyway. And it will dictate my voice. Ready? Up with the people. Yeah, yeah. Down with capitalism. Boom, boom. Up with the people. Yeah, yeah. Down with capitalism. Boom, boom. Up with the people. Yeah, yeah. Down with capitalism. Boom, boom. All right. Now we I'm Ibrahim Mubarak, founder and executive director of Right to Survive and chairperson of RAP. And what Right to Survive is an action-oriented organization made of houseless people, formerly houseless people, their allies and supporters, where we go out to the houseless community and educate them on their constitutional, civil, and human rights. And we also are the author of Tiny House Villages. The first one I set up was Dignity Village in Portland, Oregon 20 years ago. And the things we went through was hectic. So it's some growing pains, and I hope you all pick up from there and do better. And I'm gonna talk about gentrification, but I thought I'd do a spin on it. And so when I think of that spin, because this is the first time I'm changing my speech in the middle of something, bear with me. Okay, what do you see when you look at me? That's a good question.
A warrior.
I like that. According to the American government, I'm the three worst things that I represent. I'm black, I'm a houseless advocate, formerly houseless, and I'm Muslim. At any given time, I'm attacked by 1, 2, or 3 of those every day. And so if I can do this work, what more can you do? Because I don't care what they think about me. It's what they need to care what I think about them, or what we think about them. I got into this activism 30 years ago when I left my realm of comfort and started traveling around this country. What I would do, I'd put a city, state, or country on a dartboard, and I would spin that dartboard and throw that dart, and wherever it went, that's where I went. And what I would do, I would stay in a houseless shelter and flood the system with my resume, get a job, contract myself out for a year, get an apartment, leave that apartment with 90 days left and go back to the streets, hang out with the houseless people, save my money and do the same thing. But it was a catch to it. I had to go where I knew nobody so I could survive on the street without saying, hey, can I stay in your house? And it had to have a sports team. Because then I know it was black people there. So I wouldn't be by myself. So in doing this, I was finding out why houseless people couldn't get productive again, why they wouldn't be productive. And so I left Minneapolis, Minnesota. I was working at 3M on my way to California. And I stopped in Portland, Oregon, and I worked for Fujitsu. Now, in 1998, I was making about $17.95 an hour, and I walked off my job to become houseless. So somebody say nobody never volunteered to be houseless, well, here you go, I'm that person. And it worked. But then I got caught up in the system where the police criminalized me. I had a girlfriend, we had a baby, and they took her 3 days. She was 3 days old because we were living in the streets, and I've been trying to fight that, and I went through all kinds of numerous things I got charged with. They said I got charged with drug possession, criminal trespass, disobeying a lawful order, when they tell you you can't be here, and I say, yes, I can. That's disobeying a lawful order. So if you can Google me, you'll see all of that shit I went through to be here to come see. So we want to talk about gentrification. Gentrification is an improvement of a house or a neighborhood or district to meet the middle class standards. I say that again. Gentrification is an improvement of a house, a neighborhood, or a district to meet the middle class standard. So they skipping a class, isn't it? So they don't care about us. So I want to talk about the gentrification of houseless people in a tiny house village and being swept. That's something nobody talks about, because gentrification is to improve something to make it look better, and they don't put the native people, the people back into that neighborhood once they improve it. And people talked about the broken windows theory. And who more or less know about the broken windows theory than the houseless community? And you see people, they don't have communities anymore. How many people live in houses, live in a neighborhood right now? How many? Do you know your neighbor?
Yeah.
Do you come out and have block parties?
Yeah.
A lot of neighborhoods don't. They don't know. They too busy trying to keep up with themselves, and we become individualized. Because I got to get mine. I have to do this. I don't have time to help my brother, my sister, my cousin, my friend, or my neighbor, because I'm struggling to help myself, because my community may be gentrified next time. So that's why the government is afraid of houseless people, because we build communities. I know in the Bible it said where 2 or 3 meet in my name, I'll be there. But in the houseless community where 2 or 4 meet, they getting swept. It's a sore sight. It's an eyesight, I'm sorry. It's a sword. It's a thumb into capitalist system, because they don't want you to see that you can live and create without going through their method and paying and patronizing the American dream. We all know what the American dream is, right? The one you have to be asleep to believe it. You know, you go to school, go to college, get married, have 2.5 children, buy a house with a white picket fence and a dog to go bow wow. You know, and that dream is so elusive, because you know why? You show me a 0.5 child, we'll be rich. 2.5 child. So when that elusive dream that you don't get, then you talk from grade school on up, and you can't meet that dream, that criteria. You thought of yourself as a failure, but you're not a failure. You failed to believe a lie, somebody else's concept. This is what you should do. But we all individual, and we got to fit our own mold. If we can accept differences and put it behind us and work together and become one, this shit wouldn't be happening now that we're allowing. Now they're using the same tactic to do it to houseless people, because they don't want the soreness or the innovation that houseless people have to catch on to other people, saying, wow, we can live in a tiny house village and we don't have to pay that high, what, $1,100 for efficiency? I don't know how much is here in Minneapolis, but in Portland, and efficiency is $1,100 a month. Astounding, right? That's house notes, isn't it, some people? So I want to get back to the gentrification of houseless people. When houseless people gather, no matter how their stuff look, they creating community, they networking, they creating solidarity, and they passing along ideas, and they making a life for themselves, because they once believed in that elusive American dream. And the government, the city officials, the decision makers do not want you to see that. They don't want you to catch on to that, because how many people would rather pay $1,200 a month or $1,100 a month for an efficiency when you can pay $250 a month and live in a tiny house just as well? It's all about shelter. It's all about looks. It's all about believing into this capitalism system which divide and conquer. I grew up in Chicago, and the first time I had contact with a white person when I went to college. And I found out, hey, they just like me. We sleep, we eat, we bleed, we dance, we get drunk, we have hangovers, we do all of that. So when they coming in and they say, we see all this open space that's not being utilized, and the houseless community say, hey, we can sit here, we can build here, we can build a community where we can network and come together and be productive our way, not the capitalist way. They don't want that. Then they come in and say, they call it sweeps. I call it human cleansing. Because that's just what they're doing. They pushing us to the edge. Where can we go? That I learned that when I was with D-Hole in Denver, Colorado, Denver Homeless Out Loud, is where can we go? They don't want us in the neighborhood. They don't want us in the business district. They don't want us in the industrial district. So we go to the woods. Now they say, oh, we're polluting the woods and the natural areas. And we got the environmentalists coming after us. So where do we go? Let's go back to the neighborhoods and take it over. 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. How many people know a houseless person? How many people are houseless? How many people would trade spots with a houseless person? I don't think you understood. If you know a houseless person, if you know the trials and tribulation they go through, if you know they get criminalized for exercising human rights and they arrested, if you know they get their children taken away from it, why aren't you doing something? Why aren't we doing anything about it? Why are we letting the police, the capitalists, the SS or the Gestapo, whatever you want to call them, come in and move our human brothers and sisters? Houselessness taught me something when they do that. It taught me that I can hug this brother without feeling difference. Whether he's Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, white, black, tall, skinny, flesh and hands, short, redhead, no hair, he's still a human. And what we doing, we forgetting our humanity. We forgetting about humanity. We forgetting about ourselves. Because if I don't help you, I'm not helping myself. Again, if I don't help you, I'm not helping myself. If you're not helping people, if you're not helping humans, you're living beneath your privilege as a human and you practicing human malpractice. Again, you practicing human malpractice because it's inhumane to watch somebody get their shoes, their clothes taken away, being swept, everything they work for, they utilize their clothing, their ID, their medical thing, their family, their pets, their mental state of being, and they getting pushed aside and we standing there, oh look, those people are undesirable. Why are they undesirable? There's no public showers, there's no public restroom, there's no place for them to sleep, so how can they keep clean? How can they keep themselves, their hygiene up? How can they motivate themselves to go look for work and they got all of their stuff going with them? Because I can talk, going with them. This is absurd. What can we do about it? I come to so many of these meetings and I travel around the state, these states. I come to so many, we got people gathering and they talk. And that's it. You can fix your mouth to say any fucking thing you want. I want to see us do something. Talk is cheap. Let's do it. Let's stop talking and do it. You know why? Because they're doing it to us. Thank you much. Bye.
All right. That was amazing. Next up, we have Tony Sparks, who joined us today from San Francisco State University.
Okay. All right, I'm going to try. I don't think I need a microphone. I'm going to try and stand and read because I realized I don't think I can actually sit. And caveat, I rewrote my talk last night after the conversations that I had at the bar. So I both don't exactly know what I'm going to say and haven't had a chance to read it yet. The other caveat I wanted to make is I actually have a PowerPoint, but I was too lazy to hook it up and I needed to read it. So just so you know, there are a number of lengthy quotes in here. I'm going to talk about reports to San Francisco's 311 system about homeless people. So just know, I'm going to try and read the quotes. If I'm saying something shitty, that's a quote. So in October 2015, the city added a feature to the city's 311 app that allowed people to enter a category called homeless concerns. And for those of you who don't know, a 311 system is the city's non-emergency service line. It's kind of like 911, except for potholes and dog poop. And the numbers itself come from when it used to be a phone call. You used to call up, and you can still call up, but in most cities now, the 311 system is either an app or an online system. If you've seen the sort of see-click fix apps, that's a variation of the 311 app. In San Francisco, the addition of the category homeless concerns to the 311 system was particularly timely because in that time, the run-up to the Super Bowl, the citizen complaints regarding homelessness were at an all-time high. The addition of homeless concerns allowed the city administration to simultaneously allow annoyed city dwellers both to voice their concerns and have the expectation that those concerns will be met by the city. The introduction of homeless concerns to the 311 also served as a convenient PR function for the mayor. In a press conference, here comes one of those long quotes. In a press conference announcing the addition of homeless concerns, the mayor opined, "Today we take a step forward as a compassionate city, providing us a new way for our constituents to let us know about a person who needs a well-being check. Walk past someone suffering in the street does not reflect our San Francisco values. Our residents want to help and we are providing ways for them to do that. These enhancements to the San Francisco 311 app will give people who live, work, and visit San Francisco a way to let the city know about homeless residents who might need help in assessing safe, clean, emergency shelters, and vital services or finding permanent housing." Now, these statements of compassion coincided, coincidentally, with growing criticism from activist advocacy organizations and the media, some of which are in this room, regarding what many perceived as the city's criminalization of its unsheltered residents. By couching the addition of homeless concerns as an act of compassion, the mayor was able to have it both ways. This was an astute political move. On one hand, he can ensure his constituents that are troubled by the sight of unhoused residents that the city had hear them and are responsive to their concerns, while also reassuring his critics that these actions are not criminalizing, but acts of compassion and benevolence. However, although the mayor touted this compassionate composition of the 311 app, the functions available on the app are exactly the opposite. I should have brought my slides. So on the slides, I have a screenshot of the app. And basically, you go into the 311 app on your phone. I can show you on your phone. And it gives a list of things. Broken signs, graffiti, trash, poop. Top of that list is homeless concerns. Then you click on homeless concerns, and it gives you a range of things that you types of concerns that you can respond to. There's about 6, but they fall into the following categories: aggressive behavior, encampments, cleanup, and trash and waste. Thus, while a concerned citizen may report a person who they, I forgot, and well-being check. To be fair, it's an alphabet. Thus, while a concerned citizen may report a person who they perceive as lacking housing as in need of medical assistance, they're likewise, and perhaps additionally empowered, to view those who lack shelter as an unwanted nuisance whose removal is both expected and deserved. This transformation of human in need to nuisance for removal is not accidental. It's built into the structure of the 311 system. Whereas 911 systems are largely designed to respond to the needs of humans who need assistance, 311 systems are solely and primarily designed to deal with everyday nuisance and land use issues. Or to put it more succinctly, it only deals with things that can be abated, that is stopped, or removed. In this sense, the 311 system is structurally ill-equipped to deal with humans as rights-bearing subjects insofar as the reduction of human to object renders impossible the contestation, discussion, and negotiation that make for politically meaningful persons. On the flip side, though, the person who reports the 311 concern is imbued with the power to not only confirm and reaffirm the status of a homeless person as waste to be removed, but to also reaffirm his or her status as a citizen who can summon the coercive power of the state. In this sense, the addition of the homeless concerns to the 311 system represent a sort of co-production of knowledge between state and citizen that solidifies the constitution of some bodies and norms as legitimate and deserving, and excludes and criminalizes other voices, needs, and desires. This co-production forms a kind of suturing between state and society that reaffirms middle-class norms of property and public space while foreclosing possibilities for cross-class alliances and new forms of socio-spatial possibility. So with this in mind, I approached the text of these concerns, saying this as a caveat, because the concerns are really shitty, but I don't want to dwell on that. I don't want to speculate on the belief, the intentions of the reporter, but what I want to do is I want to try to understand the ways that these tweets, most of them, draw upon, challenge, and reproduce a specific set of socio-spatial norms. So what I did for this project was me and a group of undergrad students analyzed about 19,000 311 reports made either to the web app or to the mobile app, but that were posted between July 2015 and July 2016. I sort of picked those dates randomly, mostly because there are so many. They average about, I think, 1,000 reports a day just in the homeless concerns category. And if someday you're wanting to have some twisted sort of fun, you can watch it live about what people are complaining about. And almost solely, it's dog poop, homeless person, dog poop, dog poop, dog poop, homeless person, homeless person, homeless person. Is how the live feed looks if you read it. So we looked across categories and within categories. And what we found was, in most cases, the categories themselves were almost meaningless, whether it was aggressive behavior or wellness check or cleanup. What users were concerned with were perceptions of user safety and access. But that had almost nothing to do with the person who was being reported on, and almost everything to do with the person who was reporting. So across categories, users were overwhelmingly concerned with the taking up of public space by sidewalk dwellers, particularly bothered by issues of blocking of sidewalks by tense people and possessions. So while these blockage reports often contain reference to unsanitary or unsightly issues like tent blocking sidewalk with several used needles on pathway, blockage itself in most of the reports, now keep in mind, when you report something, the city has to respond, and you can monitor that, right? So you report it, it lists as open, and then when the city closes it, you know that they've responded, and if they don't respond, you can get back to the city and say, hey, why haven't you responded? So blockage itself is usually presented as an unquestioned and transparent affront to public order and law that requires very little explanation. Or as one report explains, these encampments block the sidewalks and the residents and employees area are intimidated by their presence. Please respond to our multiple complaints. Of the reports that mention blocking or blockage, all invoke the term as a justification for removal in and of itself, as in 6 to 8 homeless people camped out blocking sidewalk, or 2 homeless dudes blocking sidewalk with cars, excessive bicycle parts, or an encampment with a bunch of abandoned trash almost completely blocking sidewalk. These reports illustrate a common sense understanding of public space as primarily a space of unhindered movement and flow that is reflected and reified through the encampment and cleanup categories of homeless concerns. As either the explicit or implicit object of the report, the unsheltered person shifts in these reports and in legal understandings of homeless people from human user of space to blockage to be removed. So despite the overwhelming similarities between categories, there were some differences. So I just want to touch on a couple. In the aggressive behavior category, for instance, the most interesting thing to me and my students was we found almost no behavior that we would have considered aggressive. There was no reports of people approaching. There were a lot of reports about people yelling, but weirdly, there were almost no reports about the content of the yelling or even that people were yelling at somebody. Mostly it had to do with the volume, right? More reports if people were louder, and what was being said or who was being said to was seldom mentioned. But even more common than those yelling reports were reports of what I've come to call persistent presence. That is, a frequent reoccurring theme in the reports was the perception that spaces occupied by people and their belongings constituted in of itself a threat to the home's residents. So for instance, one reporter writes, same problems as yesterday, same spot. Bums, drugs, poop on the ground, bum giving another bum a hand job, not civilized, healthy, or safe, this element needs to be eradicated. As this quote suggests, it's not simply that people are doing private things in public spaces that are provoking a report, it's the fact that the presence seems persistent. Frustration with this intransigent presence is a key feature of most of these aggressive complaints. So there are complaints such as homo subject aggressive and not willing to relocate due to numerous requests. And homeless people blocking sidewalk, occupying bus stop while using drugs. Ask them to relocate, all refused. Here it's not one's action towards the complainant that's interpreted as aggressive, but the homeless person's inaction in response to the complainant's presence. So user anxiety and apprehension arises from the persistent presence of the individual in question, and the act of refusal to move, to leave, to stop on the part of the homeless subject is reframed as aggressive behavior. And of course, those aggressive behavior complaints get rerouted to the police, whereas the other complaints get rerouted to DPW or one of the other agencies. Of all the categories in the homeless concern specified, encampment and cleanup are probably the closest to traditional 311 categories. So like illegal dumping or graffiti removal or damaged property, encampment and cleanup refer mostly to unsightly or dysfunctional matter out of place. As in the aggressive category, most common themes dealt with safety and access. However, when we get to the encampment and cleanup categories, most focus primarily upon bodies, encampments, and belongings as objects rather than actors. So in about half the reports, the connection between the presence of waste and homelessness was simply inferred. Statements like, human excrement outside my house, and that was just the end of the complaint. Bikes, tools, and electronic waste, an awful smell in Quincy Alley. The other half, though, the connection was made particularly explicit. For instance, this one, particularly verbose, most of them are not this long, report notes, a 70 to 80-year-old white woman seems to be struggling with some sort of mental health issues. As she is today, she is often sitting on the friend school planner, muttering, sometimes scribbling in a notebook. Often she's very dirty, covered with food and waste. I believe she defecates in the area as well, though I've not directly witnessed this action, only the results. She arrived again a few minutes ago, along with coincidental fresh deposit. Children are pleasant, please help. Such reports make explicit that the unclean and unhealthy object for removal is as much the sheltered individuals as the product of their presence. On the surface, such issues would be seemingly cheaply and easily solved with the provision of restroom facilities, trash cans, sharps containers. But the city, however, has steadfastly refused to provide these amenities. And in one case, a portable latrine that was provided by a local advocacy organization prompted a whole host of a tweet storm of complaints and was removed within days. So the 311, additionally, the 311 system provides no mechanism for citizens to request these sorts of palliative measures. The only thing you can do in the system is to request that the city relocate or clean up the offending space or person. The effect rhetorically transfers the responsibility for unsafe or unhealthy conditions from the provision of public resources to the perceived deviance of the street-dwelling individual. I wanted to talk about, I've only got 1 minute, so I'm going to make this really quick. I wanted to talk about well-being check, because well-being check is almost A, never used, it's only about 11%, and B, nothing in there had anything to do with anybody's well-being. But I can talk about that after. So in sum, the use of the 311 app report to report concerns specifically related to the behavior and presence of houseless people raises a number of issues. By singling out the unhoused as a distinct category, the app relies upon and reproduces unhoused individuals as outside of and deviant from the general population. For instance, although someone can report aggressive behavior by homeless people, there's no correlative procedure for reporting non-emergency sexually or racially motivated aggressive behavior by any other member of the population. Secondly, as a category placed literally alongside trash, graffiti, and waste, the person is presented within the app as simply another unsightly, discomforting presence to be removed. Most importantly, the addition of homeless persons to the San Francisco's 311 system reduces the vast and complex issue of homelessness to a matter of public order and nuisance. Equating people with shelter, graffiti, trash, broken streetlights positions them as something always already contrary to the interest in the health of the public. Homeless people here become not just signifiers of disorder, but are unmade as human with rights and reconstituted as objects of waste that not only should be removed, but whose removal is in the public good. The transformation of people into objects is not simply a process of dehumanization. It's a process of depoliticization through which thinking, speaking, rights-bearing individuals are transformed through the language of land use regulation into objectively comprehensible obstructions, nuisances, and trespass. Sirs.
All right. Thank you, Tony. Okay, well this is perfect because I'm now just going to pass the mic to Deborah Arnold and Alison Johnson from the Housing Justice League in Atlanta, Georgia. Here we go.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Greetings to you. First, my name is Deborah J. Arnold. I'm a community activist and a resident who lives in Mechanicsville of the Neighborhood Planning Unit, V, and this was developed by our late African-American Mayor Jackson to include the city's planning in the 70s. I'm a former resident of Tent City, Atlanta, USA. I have an undergrad from Georgia State University, the university that threatens to displace our community. I also have a graduate in human services with a focus on Christian ministries from Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia. It is my passion and mission to help my community. I serve as the president of my tenant association and noticed that there were some changes going on, such as making payments for repairs, requests to buy our own appliances, not maintaining the complex. So through that, we developed our tenant association, and I joined up with Housing Justice League. As a member of Housing Justice League, our mission empowers residents to organize, to preserve affordable housing, prevent gentrification, and build power for a housing justice movement. Our tenants, we were notified by a VISTA worker that was employed with Housing Justice League, an American Free and Service Committee. We found out that our apartment complex for affordability were expiring within a little over a year. And we as residents didn't even know it, didn't have any idea that within a year or so we were gonna be homeless. So, Housing Justice League helped us fight. And even though the tenants were intimidated, afraid of standing up for themselves, afraid of retaliation, losing their homes, as a leader, it was important for the tenants to know their rights, and to know we have power in numbers. We fought this issue and the contract was extended for affordability housing until 2022. Thank you. I'm going to talk more about actions. I am more of a quiet, laid-back person, a Christian who like everything to be calm. The Housing Justice League, one of our actions was one of our actions for affordability and to prevent gentrification was our winter state of emergency in Atlanta, Georgia, where the Georgia State Institute of Technology Research helped us with a report that include wrongful evictions, inclusionary zoning, and medium income, just to name a few. There are over 42,000 evictions in 2016. We knew something needed to be done. So as an action, we marched the streets of Atlanta with a band, with students, and all those who loved us and helped our community. We marched to the Fulton County courts, and we put eviction notices on the Fulton County courts to let them know that you have been served. You have been served. And out of that, we were able to have meetings with the Fulton County Commissioner, along with the sheriff, and their lawyers to listen to us. They heard our voices, and they're like, they're for us. They're on for us. They're going to move forward with it. Another one of our actions with Tanya Washington, a lawyer, professor at Georgia State University, where our mayor was trying to evict her from her home. And he went as far to evict them by eminent domain to move her and the whole community block out of their homes. But we, as Housing Justice League, we fought. We went to court. We went through the media. We had a lot of coverage, and to this day, they're in court fighting that issue. And we believe when we fight, we win. Another, also through Housing Justice League, I'm on a committee called the Turnerfield Coalition. New name now is the Coalition for Community Benefits, which centers around the communities by a major arena. The developers and Georgia State University were the top aggressors of this property. The surrounding communities had suffered displacement over and over. We got to the point where it's now time to ask for a community benefits agreement. We call it a CBA. Community benefits are specific, measurable, and enforceable outcomes that improve the physical, economic, educational, social, or environmental conditions of the residents of neighborhoods directly impacted by the proposed development. Through Housing Justice League, we had a student movement from all the major universities to help us fight. The students did not want a university that gentrifies with their tuition dollars and have no affordability for housing, even after their graduation. They wouldn't even couldn't afford to live there. The impacted communities are historical Black communities, and we had to take on some action to get some things done. One thing that we did, we shut down an exclusive alumni dinner sponsored by the president of the university. After that action, the same night, he called our lawyers. The developers and the university were moving into our communities without even talking to us. They were just get out, you know. So we had to take action on that. Also, as a resident of Tent City, which was birthed April 1st, 2016, we marched with drums for one of the community, well, basically my community, and we chant and sung all the way to the major arena, and that's where we took residence. We took residence for 62 days. Okay, we endured the cold, the rain, storms, harassment from the major university police. Students and residents were put in jail. We used social media to get our voices heard. We even had a concert, and we even birthed some chants and songs out of Tent City. And I did one of the songs. You may look on YouTube. If not Tent City concert, you may see it on a Deborah Arnold May 29th. And we had a party, good time. We kept it alive by just having comedy shows, movie nights. College students came and had their night. Prayer from different religious beliefs that came and kept us company. Some just came by and just talked with us, but also we had visitors such as Congressman John Lewis, visitors from Miss Georgia. She came there. Miss Georgia. Okay. And out of this civil disobedience protest, we did receive $5 million for our communities. And we want an ordinance to profit our community. And also we're in a bigger fight against gentrification, and that's the Beltline. And Alison, she'll talk more about that. And lastly, I want to say, I'm a child and a servant of our Lord, and He is my life, and I thank you for hearing me today.
It's going that way. Alison, you got 5 minutes.
That's great. All right, so well, I can put this down since Deborah has talked all about everything I was going to talk about. Yes, my name is Alison Johnson, and I am from Atlanta, one of the from the Peoplestown community, and it's one of the oldest communities in Atlanta. And Deborah has talked all about HJL, so I won't do that. I'll tell a little bit about my story, like how I really got involved with Housing Justice League, and it's goes back to really how the Atlanta is supposed to be the birthplace of the civil rights movement, right? But nobody ever really talks about the Atlanta way and what Atlanta has done over the years in terms of aligning themselves with probably people in the Black community who are upper middle class, and how and what role they played in displacing people over the decades. So there's a community that's a little bit north where downtown Atlanta is. It used to be called McLaughlin, and it was a community where my grandfather was a chef over in Ansley Park, and they lived there. But one day he came home with a notice on the door saying that they had to get out. And my grandfather was a single father. He was raising my uncle and my father. So they migrated, did some community migrating just up the block, and they stayed there for maybe 8 months. And after those 8 months, they were given another notice that they had to vacate that place too because of the highway. So once that happened, our family migrated into what's called the Summerhill community. This is the community that's being heavily gentrified right now. And they lived there. My parents got married, and they lived there for, got married really young, and they lived there for maybe eight or 9 years. And that's when the Atlanta Fulton County Stadium come, and they had to be displaced again. But by that time, my parents had 2 kids, and my father, who did not have a high school diploma, had left Atlanta to go to Kansas to get his GED and to get a CDL license so he could help provide for my family. But at the time, my mother had a child who was deaf, and she did not understand or know that she was deaf until she was at least 18 months old. So she had to teach herself how to sign, but at that time there were some resources in that community that were being provided to help us, be sustainable and stay there. But we had to move because, again, the Atlanta Fulton County Stadium. So by this time, my dad comes back into Atlanta, and he gets a job with the city of Atlanta where he works as a sanitation worker. But my mother couldn't work because at the time there weren't a lot of educational institutions that were prepared to handle kids with who were hearing impaired. But so they buy a home eventually in this community. But by the time we're in this home for maybe 5 or 10 years, my father passes away really young. And so my mother keeps the home. It's a family home that's still there, who's struggled so hard to make sure that, you know, she's able to be a homeowner and have this dream of where she's able to pass down an inheritance to her children, which is now being currently threatened by gentrification. So just to say all of that, that this is a struggle that's continuing to happen, and it's only being allowed to happen because the Black elite class has been able to co-opt with other business and cooperatives and political folks that are in basically in charge and control of some of these communities. And one way that we, Housing Justice League, is trying to mitigate or combat some of these things is making sure that we are ahead of the game, that we are at the process, we are involved in the process at the beginning of whatever's happening in our communities, in our lives. Like Deborah said, we understand how very, very important it is for us to be at the table, to be able to talk about the reinvestments into our communities instead of gentrification. But that doesn't really happen unless we're really organizing. And we've got to be very strategic about organizing, and we're trying to reverse some of those trends that really set us back. But also we are talking about reversing the narrators of what's happening, because for a long time we have Black elitists that stand out and say, oh yeah, we know what these people need, but they're not these people that are impacted by what's happening. So we are making sure that while we still have 1 foot at the table, we've got 1 foot in the street. And that's how we're going to be able to shift the power and change the narrative about what's really happening and how the academia is really reviewing what's going on in our community. So we kind of took it out of the the helicopter view and brought it down to the people's view about what's happening in some of these projects that we're having.
This is caught on your chair. Move on over here. All right, and our final plenary speaker is Monique Carrillo from right here in Minneapolis and Inquilinx Unidos por Justicia.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm very delighted that I was invited to speak on this panel. And I was supposed to prepare a speech, but I feel like this is something that I have to talk about from the heart. Being born and raised in Minneapolis and watching gentrification take place and being displaced, being a single mom, I got involved with Inquilinx about a year ago. And I say I was in the wrong place at the right time. I was in an apartment that was in a very bad condition and was introduced to Inquilinx, and with their help, I avoided being displaced at the time. And I stayed consistent and worked with them and volunteered because it became something that I became very compassionate about. I have children that are growing up, excuse me, that they're in their 20s, but they work hard, but they can't find their own place because there is no affordable housing in an area that they want to live in. So all the hard work that people have put into the city at this point now is being discarded. I remember growing up and all the people of privilege that were in a little higher class wanted to get out of the city. I watched this happen, and we were all left in the city, and we got to leave them there. We got to get to the suburbs. And now that the city has been built up and everybody wants things to be more convenient, now the places that are affordable for the working class, the lower working class, are out in the suburbs. And they're not taking into consideration how the children that are in these homes are being displaced and uprooted from schools that they're in, and jobs. People that don't have cars, that have to rely on public transportation, they don't go to the suburbs at all hours of the time, of day and night, that people would need to get there. So I stay involved, and I feel like this is a fight that I have to be in, and I'm in it to win it. I just feel like I cannot walk away from this knowing that not only my children, but other people's children and other families' homes, foundations are being shaken because people are more concerned about gaining, it's for profit. It's not, because people need somewhere to live. They're in it to make the money. And to me, I just feel like there needs to be a bigger picture painted, that people that live in this bubble don't see how disruptive this is. Like, your home is your foundation, and people can take that and rattle that and just completely throw everything that you've worked for off and not have 1 ounce of concern that this is what they're doing to people and their families. Right now, we are working with tenants that live in North Minneapolis whose landlord's license have been stripped. And I actually met with one of the tenants yesterday, and there are families that are going to be displaced because the city has allowed these properties to be continuously rented out. But now that it's been brought into a light that something needs to be done, the city has went in and have condemned some of these homes, and these people are going to be homeless now, but they've paid their rent. But now they're the ones that are going to suffer. And where are they going to go? Because there isn't anything that's affordable for what they were paying to have to move now. And there was a meeting with the mayor, but he didn't have an answer to where they're going to go or what they're going to do. And all these high rises and all these luxury condos are not affordable for these people that are going to probably be homeless soon. So working with Inquilinx and other organizations that that we're in coalitions with, I just feel that it's really important to stay grounded and pay attention and keep spreading the word that this is really happening. This is really something that is impacting way more people than people are taking the time to realize. And I can't say that I have 15 minutes to sit up here because I can ramble on about this for a very long time. But it is something that is really dear to my heart. Like I said, I just got involved in this probably about a year ago, but it's something that I've been battling personally for 26 years, being a single mother. How am I going to stay in a stable home with my kids and it be affordable while I'm working? So I'm working 2 jobs at times and not being able to be there for my kids because I want them to be in a home that isn't roach infested or mice infested or mold in the walls. And my circumstance was how I got involved was all my kids are adults. They all were moving out and doing their own thing. And I moved into this apartment and I'm thinking this is going to be a great start for a new chapter in my life. Thank you for putting me in that position, God, because I have now been placed with Inquilinx, but it was a horrible situation that I would have rather have been homeless than be in that apartment. And this is going on, and so many people, we've had actually, speaking of actions, during the Super Bowl, we had an action with one of the landlords where we had about 18 tenants go on rent strike, where they finally said enough is enough. And so with that action, there are more tenants that are becoming more involved, and we are working with the tenants over north to try to get something resolved for them. But one of the tenants that went on rent strike, she has a child that's been in the hospital for a month from health issues, no heat in the apartment, no, the mold again, the mice infestations, the roach infestations, and her child's gonna get out of the hospital and she can't take them back to that. So where is she gonna go now? And our mayor didn't have an answer for her. So this is just something that the voices need to be louder so that they're heard, so that this stops happening, because the people that are in lower class housing are, I guess not lower class housing, lower class income people that are working hard to keep a roof over their families' heads is being taken from them because they want to make a bigger profit. And to me, housing isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. So it has to be brought to the forefront that this needs to be addressed in a major way and now. Like, it's not an option, this has to happen now. So I appreciate everybody being here, and I'm gonna pass this off to my team member, Jennifer. We have action.
We're doing a Q&A first.
Oh, we're doing a Q&A first. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just get so frustrated with, there's just so much. I just get so frustrated with knowing that these people are out here struggling the way that they are. And I can only do so much. We can only do so much. There's 6 of us in this organization taking on the city of Minneapolis. And it's a powerful thing, but we need so much more, so many more people to be involved and so many more voices to raise this awareness so that this can be addressed sooner than later. Because again, these people that are in these houses over north, it breaks my heart. I went and met with one of them yesterday, and she's just so distraught right now. She doesn't know what she's gonna do or where she's gonna go, because her house might be one of the ones that are gonna be condemned. And when them houses are condemned, I'm pretty sure that it's gonna be a buyer that's gonna come in and fix it up, and the rent's gonna go up, and it's not gonna be an option for them to be able to stay in their home. So voices need to be louder, and let's make an impact and stay involved and get the help that they need so that this can stop happening and people can stop being displaced.
Thank you. All right, so what we're gonna do, we got some time for a conversation. I want to try a thing where I was just writing down some of what seemed like the key phrases that folks brought up, and so I'm just gonna say what I wrote down because I think there's some intersecting ideas in this session which are really interesting, and maybe that'll help us think as we ask some questions. So this idea of houseless innovation, right, from Ibrahim, talking about how houseless folks are innovative, and the other catchphrase, which is going to stick with me forever now, is human malpractice, right? Practicing human malpractice. And I want to know who we can sue about that. So, and Tony talking about this idea of persistent presence, right? That what's coming out through this issue of the 311 app in San Francisco is removal, but this idea that there are always going to be people who someone is going to want to be removed, right? And thinking about how that forecloses cross-class alliances as well, right? I think that's a really powerful concept because there are things that folks moving to gentrifying neighborhoods in San Francisco and the folks being evicted from those neighborhoods have in common, right? And there are organizing tactics that we could start to think about that would address those commonalities. So I think that was a really important point. Deborah and Alison brought up this idea of displacement, right? And highways and stadiums being, more than anything else, vectors of displacement, right? We think of these things as like urban amenities. You brought up the Atlanta Way. I thought that was a really powerful framework as well. But through your family histories, you shared how, you know, the Fulton County Stadium and the 75-85 highway in Atlanta, these are vectors of displacement. And so we have to remember that, you know, when we think about urban infrastructure and all these spaces, you know, there's never just one meaning, and it's usually displacement at the root of much of it. And then finally, Monique brought up this really powerful idea of painting a bigger picture of the city, which I think can lead us to think about the city differently. So when we see Minneapolis, which a lot of folks got to see during the Super Bowl, right? You know, folks got to see it digitally covered in purple during the commercial breaks. Minneapolis isn't purple just because Prince lived here, right? But we can think about how we can start to kind of reframe the narratives, which I think is what you're talking about, of what gentrification really means. I think that's a really powerful tool. So that's my little spiel. So let's see, who wants to open us up here? Owen and then Cassie.
I had like so many questions that are like gonna super narrow it down, but the main one was I think kind of mostly looking at what he was talking about with tiny house villages and gentrification and I guess kind of implicitly NIMBYism and that sort of thing being a barrier to where you can put tiny houses. But I was talking about this with some architecture students last week. I'm a planning student, and we all work on tiny house village for homeless folks kind of stuff. And we noted how, well, the second village that CBC is working on in Denver is having some issues with trying to site that because of the neighborhood and not wanting homeless people there and that kind of thing, and imagining all of the things they're going to do and that. You know, the kind of shit you would expect. The one existing village that's been built, the Levitt Community Village, is in a neighborhood that was like industrial originally, and then has been not really gentrified because it wasn't like displacement. There weren't people living there really, but it's been turned into this sort of like millennial playground kind of thing, like live work play kind of thing. And it, you know, and it's actually pretty cool. And there are like some like legitimately cool people who live there. And they've like most of the the neighborhood has really embraced that village in really meaningful ways, and kind of become invested in it, and they, I think, really advocated for that village staying in that neighborhood when it had to move after the 6-month use permit expired, which is pretty cool. And so we start talking about like where can we put these, where are the places where like people want those, because they're, it's starting to be a little cool and a little hip, and like we're like, can we get it to where like every neighborhood wants its own tiny house village, and we were thinking in terms of solidarity, like they would want to support it, but then we realized we're like, oh shit, this is gonna be the next like community gardens, where like it's an important thing, and it's important for equity and for poor people, but then once it becomes this like hip thing, it then becomes a tool of gentrification, or maybe not a tool, but like an element in that, and we're like, oh my god, what are we doing? Like, so that's like a whole other thing we have to think about and like watch where that's going. So the other thing I wanted to throw out was just in case, Natalie, I think, wanted to respond to it, or was that your name?
Alison.
Alison. Oh, okay, sorry. Just the idea. I'll skip kind of the backstory on that, but the discourses between like CBAs, community benefits agreements, versus direct revenue sharing with communities, and kind of what your thoughts were on that, and like how you do your advocacy around that. So.
I think it might make sense actually for us to gather a few questions, and then folks can kind of respond. That's okay. So Cassie, and then Ken.
Sure. So what everyone said was incredible. But my question is specifically for Tony. Like, that's the kind of very similar situation where when Boston was doing a push to have the 2024 Summer Olympics, we saw an additional rollout with our 311 system, where we didn't have anything around like a specific category around homelessness, but they included like new categories, one around needles, one around public waste, that it was pretty fascinating. Our community members seem to not use it where they, you can put a picture of your motor board, but it was never a picture of someone. They waited for the opportunity for the person to leave, so they take a picture of the needles. They would, but it was always about like what you're, saying about like the like noise levels, complaints about the people themselves and things that are disruption. But a lot of organizing. We did feel like we were thankfully successful in opposing them, but we've had several other subsequent events proposed, unfortunately. But it's interesting that this happened, sort of in a similar way. But I'm wondering, we did a lot of talk about using 311 as sort of an organizing tool, and didn't fully have the opportunity to utilize it as much as we had hoped to, especially because we don't catalog, have like an active live catalog. You see your 20 there, and sometimes they'll remain on Twitter. A lot of times once they're like closed, they're deleted. And so we were having to FOIA and then waiting, 6-9 months for responses from the FOIA requests. I'm wondering how you were able to like the whole list of them. Did you not do a FOIA request, or
no?
You thought about organizing with them?
Should I just go ahead and answer that?
Yeah, why don't you just respond to that?
No, because it's public data. I just had a student write a skimming script that that downloaded all of that data into a giant Excel file.
That's incredible.
Okay, and then technology people. All right, Ken had a question, and then we'll get folks to
So
respond.
just 2 quick comments, and thank you for the summary. I mean, Brother Ibrahim, beautiful vision of what it means to be human now is just, I think, one of the most, inspiring layouts. And Tony's comments reminded me, there's, I don't know, in Black resistance history, there's some statement that Black people get arrested really for 2 crimes: moving and standing still. Right? So, I mean, that's it. That's the way the system works. So, Sister Alison, that way, I think for me, and I struggle as in the South African context, you brought up, just to add on to Eric's summary, this question of the black elite, which brings to the forefront the limits of the civil rights politics and the racialized basis. And that begins to draw in the economics, or as the $50 word is class politics, right? Yes. So how do you guys think through and the cross and interracial class alliances? So if you could just speak to how the black elite are becoming obstacles in the politics for just society.
Yeah, you want to start with that, and then we'll respond.
Well, I can't give you like a direct answer, but one thing I know that has happened is that even back in the 60s when black elite, they had more disposable incomes. Right. So that was a way of them aligning themselves with the political allies in the city of Atlanta who wanted to see, the changes in the makeup of the city, how the city has been racialized, how the extraction of our social culture has been removed out of their communities. One thing that we are doing is that we're being very honest with ourselves in terms of who is narrating our stories and what's happening. And we go way back to the Daddy King days, when our mayors were actually appointed for us. And this time around, we saw a difference where, again, 8 years ago, that was a difference too. Very small margin of 800 votes that separated the white vote from the black vote. Our city, this election was very racialized, and it was because of some of the politics that has followed us up to now. But we just have to be really honest with ourselves about who we're going to choose to represent us. Far too long, we've had that person appointed to us. That's right. So, we're coming out strong. We're not going to lie down. We're not going to lie about it. Yeah, we do need black political allies, but it hasn't happened for us. We were still in the same position. My mother's she'll be 70 years old in less than 5 years, and nothing has changed. So, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to continue to allow the same people to represent us? No.
The answer to the question is that, as gentrification stated, it's to modify and upkeep of the middle class neighborhoods. I don't have anything against pets. Pets is good, and that's what they're there to pet and to protect. But when you choose 1,000 acres, 100 acres of land like they did in Portland, just so a dog could go shit, and a human can't lay down, something fucked up with that concept. And we call them poop parks, And then they say we destroyed the environment. What do dogs shit? Let's look at reality. And then the malpractice thing, I think you can get them under the cruel and unusual punishment, because that's just exactly what it is and that's fourth, eighth amendment. Yeah. Okay. And we all are humans, so we need to treat each other like we want to be treated, because if we don't, we're gonna mistreat ourselves out of existence.
Yeah, just two quick comments. I think what you said about moving and standing still is profound and something we don't think about enough, right? We often talk about organizing for rights, but there's the time, space, and manner constraints on those organizations basically don't give a fuck if you're a human. An object can be criminalized by its existence, and I think we don't pay enough attention to that, and that feeds into the idea of gentrification and NIMBYism. This thing that separates a bitchy ass neighbor and a NIMBY is a legal framework. You work shit out with your bitchy ass neighbor and deal with it. Without the legal framework, that has no power, and legal frameworks can be changed.
Did I answer your question? Can you say it again?
Sort of. I guess, do you think that depending on how we do this, tiny house villages and our politics around that, tiny house villages could end up being a gentrifying force in some places?
Yes. Because the tiny house was a concept by houseless people that needed a place to stay. I know that you all can't eradicate a structure here, so they want you laying on the ground, rolled up in a tarp like a burrito or something, you know. What happens when the snow comes and it piles till you get up? You're freezing again, that's cruel and unusual punishment. So now, the tiny house concept have went to the middle class on up. They put them in their backyard, they call them a mother-in-law house or grandma house or something like that. And they charging people. When I went to San Jose, I was invited to speak at a tiny house conference. And when I seen what they was doing, I refused to do it. I gave them their money back and said, I'm going to sleep with the houseless people. What they did, they have a hollow tiny house. Then if you want stairs, $1,000. You want dressers, $800. You want a living room. By the time it's finished, it was $90,000. I said, what fucking houseless person got $90 fucking dollars? I don't have $90,000 to live there. So they marketing that concept, that idea off of poor people's back. And that's what, and so in Portland, they call it exclusionary zoning, where you can have 3 tiny houses in your backyard, up to 3. And the city will pay for 5 years for a person to stay there. And after 5 years, you own that tiny house, but it don't goes to those houseless people. So what's happening here, they still taking our idea, making a profit, and that's capitalism, right? That's what they do. And so we got to down with capitalism, boom, boom, right? Okay, thank you.
Well, let's take another round of maybe 2 or 3 questions, if there are any. Yeah.
Question for Tony, thinking back to the 311 system, I'm wondering what it might look like after a report went in. Who responds to that, and what does that look like for the person who was reported?
Well, depending on the report, it goes to one of about 5 different agencies. And truthfully, I think actually Chris Herring might be able to speak to this better than me. But in my experience, the best outcome is if it goes to the cops, because cops are sort of empowered to deal with humans. If it goes to public works or public health, then their only mandate is removal. They can't do anything else. So it does make a difference. And there is one of the places that it's some of the things are routed to, surprisingly few, but some of them are routed to the homeless outreach team, whose job it is to sort of go out and do triage, but there's not a lot they can do.
I could just add, I don't think it's the best when it goes to the police, but I think it's important to realize that because the police have a duty by law to respond to it and it goes to their 911 dispatch, they respond to the most part. And there are examples where people even list in that small 11% wellness check, and you can see it says, I report a wellness check, and then under resolution, citation. You know, and people describing, just like Tony did, the more sympathetic one of like, this person has mental health issues, or she's bleeding, and then resolution, citation. So,
yeah. Kelly?
Can I just on top of that, to keep that going, so there's something that's really concerning with the 311 system in San Francisco right now, that they've been getting a lot more organized. So now they have a command center. Okay, so this is being run by SFPD, by the police. We've seen it just shift in this direction that's really concerning. And so the police, and now there's a creation of a homeless department. Okay, so the homeless department and the police are working totally together. And so it's just coming out with this command center. No public process, no transparency, but we're starting to get in there. But so it's been building in a really concerning way.
I was wondering if any of you guys could talk about kind of the moralization behind tiny homes when it's a poor person living in one versus a middle class person living in one, because what I see is that they're equating going tiny to some kind of moral goodness, getting rid of your material possessions. And I'm like, that's easy to do when you know you can replace them whenever the need comes back for them, right? So like getting rid of your stuff when you can't replace it when you need it again is not something that you want to do. And then the fact that people have been living in mobile tiny homes for a very long time. They're called poor people and they're called mobile home parks. And that's never been something that anybody's ever aspired to, and that's always something to this day that's looked down upon and something that's trying to be eradicated, especially in some of our suburbs here. So I just wanted to know what your thoughts might be about that, because I absolutely think tiny homes or homes of any kind are a great solution for houseless people, but the fact that we're equating them to some kind of moral goodness when wealthier people decide to go tiny, like that they've done something good for the environment, they've done something good for humanity, is really problematic to me.
Well, I would say, first of all, can y'all hear me without this?
Yeah.
A little louder.
There's a button on the mic. You're not.
Is that it? First of all, we go to school and nobody never teach us or educate us how to live on the streets. That's the first thing. The second thing, that when we live on the streets, we have all our possessions with us that we can't put in our house. So we carry no sentimental value. A group of people needed some money one time, so they did a study on hoarding. They called it sentimental hoarding. This is my hoarding. I may not get nothing else hoarding. So I asked the question, what do you call when a rich man have 5 cars?
Yeah.
Yeah. They call it a collection. That's one thing. So in that instance, that if you don't want us gathering in the streets with shopping carts, with tarps, why not give us a land where we can build tiny houses as a meantime solution where we can rest and get our scruples together and figure out how we're going to be quote unquote productive in this society again. They're not supposed to be permanent, but now they're making it permanent because we're running out of space, we're running out of land, so they're making houses and stuff smaller and cheaper. Not cheaper. They make them more expensive, but they're making them smaller. Have you ever seen the skinny houses?
Yeah.
They don't have no backyards or nothing, they just go straight up, right? And so that's an evolution that's happening that we need to create houses. They're trying to tell us we don't need children. Children need to have a backyard to play in. So they're building these things without. So that's a marketing tool to keep back the NIMBY. So we need to snatch that fucking end off and put a Y in there and say YIMBY, yes, in my backyard, and have other people.
Yeah, just to piggyback off that, I think tiny homes is sort of a misnomer, right? I think what you're really saying is that our homes are too damn big, right? Globally, the average house size is 200 square feet. But I get what you're saying about the gentrification of tiny homes, and I'm really ambivalent about it myself. I was up in Seattle helping them put together Nicholsville Intensity 5, which are our tiny house and canvas up there, and people came out of the woodwork. Home Depot came, some University of Washington students came, some people came from the neighborhood, and they loved it. And it was condescending and horrible, right? People were like treating it like their own little dollhouse. Oh my God, let's paint a picture on it and put some flowers in front of it. And it was annoying as fuck. But at the end of the week, I saw real solidarities and real friendships forming between those people. And so, we have to also consider that it's more complicated than just rich white people wanting to feel better about themselves too, and pay attention to that as well.
I'm just gonna hover back here. Roving mic here. All right, so we got time for maybe 2 more questions, and gonna focus on folks who haven't spoken yet, which actually, so Richard and then over here.
Okay, and like something that I don't think was like directly touched on that we talked about, and I just like occurred to me when you mentioned like the 311 things going straight to the police, is like how gentrifying like working class like communities of color typically leads to like an uptick in instances of like police brutality and over policing. And I wondered if like folks wanted to like talk about that, because I think about that a lot in South Atlanta because of the absurd amount of jurisdictions that cross over Peoplestown.
Yeah.
And especially we saw that with Georgia State University moving there. They moved, within the last year, moved their police precinct into the back of the stadium. So there's just like a new police force in the neighborhood, and I think we're like what, like 5 or 6 jurisdictions in that one like area. I wonder if anyone like Monique, Alison, Deborah, and
definitely there's an uptick in the police presence around there. We are policed by 6 jurisdictions, and we are a community of Black people, you know, and it's hard and it's difficult. One thing that I know that we are trying to do, and this goes back to your question as well, is that we have an urban development that in our community that's called the Beltline. And it's a 22-mile way of where they used old railroad corridor to replace it as a means of biking and walking and other transient ways that later come down with light rail in a couple of years. But there's this promise that they will be able to provide 5,600 affordable housing. 12 years into the project, that hasn't happened. So one way that I know that we are trying to get people engaged in this process is by having something that's called popular education workshops, and where we go into the communities where they are most impacted, and we are talking about the issues of how this is going to potentially be a huge project that's going to displace hundreds of thousands of people in our communities. So we did do a research project. We partnered with a research company to help us put together this project that's called Beltlining, which is a lot similar. We got that, of course, from redlining. So it's beltlining and gentrification and broken promises on the south side of Atlanta. So one way that we are combating this is through those popular education workshops in each of the communities that are most impacted by this development. But definitely there's a presence of over-policing, always has been, but it's even worse now. So we're hoping to really mitigate some of those unintentional incidents that are going to occur.
First of all, I think that the police is out of sync with reality. Police shouldn't be called when someone's having a mental crisis. They're not educated to handle mental crisis. I think people the mental people need to come and see about them. Why do a police follow? And that put the people that's going through something, a stage in their life, at high alert. They may not act the same. I also believe in community policing, not neighborhood watch, but community policing, where we need to police our own self, like the houseless people do in some Tennessee. They police and govern their own self, because we know, I can tell the difference somebody that's coming down off a drug, that's having a mental issue, or that's been sleep deprived. Can the police do that? No. Police is supposed to be, protect and serve, instead of stopping protecting the capitalist money. They need to protect other people. So with your answer to that, no, police need to get the fuck out. You know, no more police in our community. Off the beat.
The policing?
Yeah, policing and gentrification.
Policing and gentrification. So, okay, we had the Super Bowl here, and let me just tell you how the police tried to play this Minnesota nice while they were here. We had a whole week of actions, and I know that there were actions that we have had before when they came, and they're like, you guys gotta get the fuck out of here now. They came and actually participated and blocked the streets. And so to me, I was just really flabbergasted. Like, you guys are really trying to make this look good. We had an action during the Super Bowl where we did block the light rail for 2 hours. All the people that paid these tax dollars to have this light rail put in were told they couldn't ride it because they didn't have a $4,000 Super Bowl ticket. So there was a bunch of us that said, how about you reroute them for a few hours and see how that plays out for them. And at the end of all of that, I was one of the people that voluntarily got arrested. at the end of all that, when they were sending us on our way with our citation, they said, "See, the police are nice. You have no idea how hard I bit my tongue." But with the gentrification and the displacement, they don't come into a situation when they're called and have the whole story. So they're very hostile as to how they approach and talk to people. I take in people all the time. Like my house is like a homeless shelter. Like I have 2 people there now. And there's the incident, my child has mental health issues and I was assaulted by him in October. And I had to call to get help for him and, to get him out of my house. They now want to hit him with another 10 to 12 years of prison, but they said that he has mental health issues. So with the police being involved, I really wish that it didn't have to be that. I wish there was a different source that could be called, because they're not looking at the picture that it's a mental health issue or that it's a homeless issue and that these people are going through something. Right away they want to criminalize it because they had to be called, when it's something as simple as they just need to remove themselves. I just need you to remove them and give them time to calm down. So I don't think they're educated enough or have the knowledge on how to deal with people that are dealing with different things. So right away they're criminalized, and treated like they did this horrible thing, but they're not taking into consideration the big picture of what they're actually going through. So I don't like to have to call the police. I'm working with some tenants now that their cars being vandalized, but with that being happening, they don't want to call the police because they don't want the person that's doing it for that to be the outcome. So without there being other resources or other people to call, having to call the police is sometimes more terrifying than actually dealing with the situation itself, because you don't know how it's going to turn out once you involve them.
Okay, and our final question.
I feel like by my race and also by my particular economic group, which is, people who are lower middle class, who, have this choice between living kind of on the margins of an upper class neighborhood, definitely not in a luxury condo, or, living in a gentrifying area, we can be like a really destructive force. What are some ways to act in solidarity with the people who are being displaced and not, be the person who's displacing people, or to advocate for people?
I know that here we had tenants that there was a company that came in and bought out these buildings and wanted to up the rent $500 per unit. And some of these people lived in these units for 20 years or so. And it wasn't just the people in the buildings that felt that this was wrong, it was the community that got involved and said that these people are part of our community and have been part of our community and fought with us and them until there was a negotiation with this property manager, with this property company, that the rents would not be increased. So it just takes getting involved and making your voice being heard that we don't agree with what's going on. And we're gonna stand behind them and we're gonna back them until the end, because it isn't right for you to come in and push out people that have lived here all this time because you wanna make more money. These people are a part of our community and they have been part of our community, and we're gonna fight with them to stay in our community. So I guess getting involved and knowing your neighbors and finding out if there is a way that you can help them directly from being displaced if you see there's something that's taking place.
One more response. Anyone want to?
Well, I know I'll just be real brief. One thing that we did in terms of creating something that's called a toolkit, where we were targeting different people as opposed to how we will be doing some of our public education. And one of them was called a gentrifier. And in that toolkit, we were asking people to share their experience in the new community, come to City Hall, get involved in the campaigns that are already happening, talk to us about setting up community funds where people may live next door to you who are being targeted by code enforcement, that there's a fund created to help people uplift them out of the circumstances where they may be pushed out of their communities through code enforcement. So getting involved in campaigns that are already happening, going to your neighborhood associations and talking about how do you get involved, hosting a gentrifier, for I am a gentrifier, so are you, and hosting those kind of things in your home.
First of all, we know this government is a colonist, they got colonist mentality. They like to colonize shit, you know. So the thing of it is to join us, because if you don't, you're next.
Yeah.
Believe it, and join an organization. Make an organization. My daddy's father organization, my little sister organization. Do an organization that's going to help people in order to help themselves, help them up. Because giving, you just gave, but help them. Use your skills, use your knowledge. We all need money. You can use that. But if you can help somebody to fine-tune their skills where they can work, get up on their own feet, or if you can go to City Hall and march and help them organize and march. But listen to the people that's affected and not try to tell them what to do.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So, Craig says that he has a helpful resource for folks who don't want to call the police. You want to share that?
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to mention in the conversation around policing gentrification, there's this amazing document online. If you just Google what to do instead of calling the police, it'll come up. And it's this great compilation of like strategies that'll alternatives to calling the police, like lessons from community groups of like their experiences with trying to come up with like community accountability practices. There's like great introductory documents for people who like maybe it's not obvious that we don't want to call the police, so that how to kind of get people on board with that. So it's like this kind of like crowdsourced thing. There's tons of great resources there. So again, it's like if you just Google what to do instead of calling the police, that'll come up. I really recommend it for people who haven't seen it yet. That's it.
And also, we got to remember, people are not the problem. The problem's the problem.
Yeah. All right, so let's give this panel a huge hand. All right, so what we're going to do now is an action, right? This is kind of unusual.